Meet the press.
Chuck Todd.
Good Sunday morning. There's a lot of political news, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But first, there's breaking news out of Orlando, Florida, where overnight a gunman opened fire in a gay nightclub. Police in Orlando say there are mass casualties, with as many as 20 people dead. We have this tragedy covered from all the angles, and I'm going to begin with my colleague, Gabe Gutierrez, who is on the scene right now in Orlando. And Gabe, bring us up to date.
Chuck, good morning. This is still a very active scene. As you mentioned, police saying about 20 people are dead. At least 42 people were wounded and rushed to local hospitals. Within the past few minutes, we've seen witnesses bust over to the Orlando Police Department as this investigation is just beginning. Now, this all started around 2 a.m. local time at the Pulse nightclub, a popular gay dance club here in Orlando, and witnesses describe a chaotic scene. One witness said that he had to climb over bodies to escape. More than a dozen people trapped in a bathroom ducking for cover. Now, this all happened around 2 a.m. Then after that, an officer arrived at the scene, an off-duty officer, and engaged with the suspect, who then retreated inside and took hostages. Around 5 a.m. local time, that's when authorities used an armored vehicle to plow into the nightclub and use an explosive device to distract the suspect, who was killed in the gunfire. Now the investigation is beginning into what exactly the motive was here. The suspect was found with an assault-style rifle, a handgun, and another type of unspecified device. Now, one officer was injured, but was saved by his Kevlar helmet. Again, about 20 people are dead, police say, and at least 42 others were wounded. And authorities are investigating this as an act of terror. Back to you, Chuck.
Gabe Gutierrez on the ground in Orlando. Gabe, thanks very much. We've had some eyewitness accounts. I want to play a couple of them for you now. One person who was in the club, and one a mother of somebody who was in the club. Here it is.
So you heard the bang, bang, and sound that he rings when it's on. And all I thought was just, wow, this is real. It sounded, it's just like, it's like the bass, and then you turn around and look, and it's just people falling and screaming, and just looking around, you see people laying there and bloody. It's just like, do you help them or do you just go? And it's like, when you're hearing the bullets just go constantly, all you can do is think of right now is yourself.
I just feel terrible. I don't know where my son is. I haven't been able to get a hold of him. I know that he was sitting next to his boyfriend, and his boyfriend was taken by ambulance with multiple gunshots, and we can't get a hold of him.
Earlier this morning at one of the first news conferences giving some information to the public, here's what one officer said about the situation.
Absolutely, we are investigating this from all parties' perspective as an act of terrorism. Anytime that we have potentially dozens of victims in any of our communities, then I think we can qualify that as a terrorist activity.
Let me bring in Williams, our Chief Justice Correspondent. Pete, already if there's 20 dead, sadly this will already be one of the at least one of the 5 worst mass casualty shootings in American history. What more can you tell us specifically on this terrorism angle?
I think it's safe to say that the number of deaths going to go up above 20 as they get further into this investigation. There really are 3 sort of focuses right now is on the club itself. That'll be many days of forensic reconstruction of what happened. Secondly, the hospitals where the shooting victims were taken. They'll be interviewing them to get more information from the witnesses. And third, and the most intense focus right now for the federal authorities, is try to figure out who this person is and what the ideology was. They have a good idea who it is. I'm told he's a U.S. citizen from Florida, not from Orlando. Early indications of some kind of connection or influence by international terrorism. The federal authorities have said so at the news conference. They said there certainly seem to be some indications of leanings that way. But now the FBI is trying to figure out, well, was this person in their database? No indication of that yet, but this is very early. What were the influences? They'll be looking at this person's emails, phone calls, who was he talking with, try to reconstruct the days that led up to this. The authorities say it was obviously well prepared, and of course you know that just from the fact that he was so well armed and also had some kind of suicide vest or some kind of explosive device with him. But whether this was targeted because it was just a place where a lot of people would be gathered at 2 o'clock in the morning in Orlando, there won't be that many places like that, or whether it was targeted because it was a gay nightclub, they don't know the answer to that yet.
Now, the gunman is dead.
Yes.
There was a hostage situation, which then, and they brought in a hostage negotiator. So they've had some interaction with this gunman. So they must have a lot more information about perhaps some motivation that he might have said to them.
Unclear at this point. The people I've talked to don't know about that sort of information from the scene yet, which is still relatively chaotic. But there were basically two exchanges with police. The first one was at 2 a.m. Perhaps at the door of the nightclub.
There seemed to be a club, right?
Yeah.
Somebody, a bodyguard type of...
Outside.
Well, he was actually on duty, but what was there? And they got the call at 2 a.m. They were responded immediately. There was an initial exchange of gunfire. Then the gunman went into the club and took hostages. That continued for about 3 hours, and the police department was getting messages and phone calls from people hiding in bathrooms and other. This is a club with many rooms, saying, you know, you got to help us. And that's when they decided to basically burst through the wall. But the interesting thing is that during that time, this was not a person who just kept shooting people. We don't know exactly when the people were wounded and killed. We don't know if that was...
We don't know if that's the initial of two or whether it was how the situation...
Right, but in other words, this person did not retreat into the club as our best understanding at this point and just keep shooting until there were no more people left to shoot.
And they're fairly convinced he acted alone, at least at this nightclub.
That's a good point, because unfortunately we've seen from some other terrorism incidents around the world that when something like this happens, there'll be multiple locations.
Right.
They say at this point there's no indication of that, no indication that this person was acting with anyone else. Preliminary information, but they've gone out of their way to say, we think this was a one-off.
And there was, just the day before, there was a shooting in Orlando
Yes.
of an entertainer. No connection, they don't think.
That's their initial assessment, yes.
All right. Obviously, the panel with me now, Tom Brokaw, Hugh Hewitt, Amy Walter, Joy Reid. Tom, we don't know. As I say, hate crime, terrorism, there's a number of directions this is going to go, and we know political reaction will be based on what the FBI tells us. Should it matter? It's a terrorizing situation, no matter what.
It shouldn't matter whether, I mean, if it turns out to be connected to some kind of an international group, all the politicians will jump all over that and say, we've got to do something about them. But let's say it's a domestic shooting.
Bon is
We've
bon,
got to do
boy.
something about that. You know, I'm a gun owner. I've been saying this for months.
You're a
It's time for people to come
international
together and say,
secret
enough.
society
If you
member.
have an assault weapon, if it was an AR-14,
And
say
look at
the
the
first
crap
one
holding
said,
your skull
not
together.
to be in civilian hands. It's designed to do one thing, to kill people. And we don't have any dialogue going on in America about all of these mass shootings that have occurred since San Bernardino. And they've been going on around the country, 3 or more killed at a time. This absolutely belongs in the political debate, and it ought to be a place where both parties can talk about it in a rational fashion to dial down. You got a problem? Get a gun. That's what goes on now. It's got to come to an end. It's a terrible commentary.
Your initial thoughts and reaction?
Well, the unmistakable mutterings of violence have been coursing through the world for years, and this looks like the Paris concert hall attack where a number of people are trapped. And I just finished Daniel Silva's new novel, The Black Widow, which is about domestic terrorism being imported by ISIS, and it's chilling. It's very chilling. We focus on the San Jose violence, we focus on the violence in Chicago, San Bernardino, but ISIS wants to do this here. They want to do it here a lot. And so I found Pete's reporting remarkable that they're on this so fast that they had electronic devices. They will figure out what the network is. But it's very chilling. And every dead person is a tragic murder. But if ISIS gets their people here or inspires, it will be a long series of years.
The arming of this too, right? This is what this just gets everybody, and this is why you wonder we can't have the holistic conversation.
No.
Right? You know, we don't, you know, how do we prevent terrorists from arming themselves so well?
You know, I just can't stop thinking about the mother that
That
you
mom.
showed.
Oh, my gosh.
So,
Yes.
you know, as a parent myself. And I think that this is where a lot of people, I sit, and you do too, you talk to a lot of voters.
You
I
went
sit with
from
a lot
happy-
of women
look
voters
at-
especially. And they've been
You
saying
have
this really for the
a
last
smile
13
on your
years. They do not make a
face
distinction
about the
between
violence.
domestic terrorism
Just like that guy
and
in the
international
interview had a
terrorism.
smile
They're
on
just as
his
scared to send their kids
face
on the school bus,
about the
as
violence.
they are this idea that ISIS is infiltrating us. And so I think it's getting to the heart of what is it that Americans are looking for, the sense of safety and security that right now nobody can provide to them.
Joy, that's the overwhelming feeling I have, is that there is this just feeling of insecurity. We lack control on the terrorism issue. We seem to lack control and moral on the gun issue. We seem to lack cultural norms too. I mean, there's just a part of this that's just like, it feels like a new normal, and it's an
Yeah.
uncomfortable normal.
It's a very comfortable normal because Joaquin says it looks like, San Bernardino looks like Paris. It also looks like Charleston, right? So we've had mass casualty shootings that were purely
By the way, dead people are dead people.
And
I hate to say, it all looks bad.
It also looks like Newtown, right? So we have mass casualty shootings that are affecting children, teachers, people in church, whether it's a hate crime or whether it's related to something related to international terrorism. We're not getting
People
to
in
the core
church?
issue, which is how easy it is to get a gun. I mean, Florida happens to have the largest gun-owning population in the country and some of the most lax laws as to how you can get your hands on even an assault rifle. So that if you mean to do harm, we're talking about a state with 1.4 million, nearly 1.4 million law-abiding, obviously, gun owners, but we're not talking about that issue right now. The only debate that's taking place in the state of Florida is the Supreme Court weighing whether to allow complete open carry so that people can actually visibly show firearms on the streets of Florida. So we're having
If there was somebody carrying a gun in there, he'd be dead instead of some cop that was slack.
Who are afraid to have their kids out in the world, not just because of criminals, but also because of maybe a deranged person.
Regular people don't think of it the way we're just talking about it. Regular people see violence. They see dead people in Orlando, and it could have been anybody that they knew.
It will be a very young casualty list because it's a nightclub open at 3 a.m. It's going to be tragedy after tragedy. People vote their fears. They vote their children's futures. Don't impact it. But what I'm talking about ISIS is we do focus on mass casualty at Mother Emanuel. I was doing one of these shows on Mother. It's terrible. But ISIS would do this to 100 million Americans if they could. That's what Joby Warwick at the Post.
But so would white nationalists. I mean, this is the problem, is that people like Dylan Roof want to do the same thing, and he wrote a manifesto saying that people like him would too.
Just capacity.
Yeah, but how many white nationalists have done it?
The definition of when something is labeled terrorism versus not labeled terrorism.
White nationalists.
There is a reason that the definition, when the word gets used and when it doesn't. Explain this.
All right, well, two ways to look at it.
I mean,
it doesn't really
white
matter to
nationalists?
law enforcement people.
I love my country, I love my nation, and I'm white. Does that make me a white nationalist?
Then it becomes the FBI's jurisdiction. They're responsible for investigating.
Are you talking
terrorism.
about
But
social
beyond that technical
nationalists?
thing, it's always seems to be a huge.
I am not a social
nationalist. It doesn't really matter that much.
But I love my
Mr. Hewitt's
country.
point about ISIS, really, there's sort of two ways to think about ISIS. One
What are you
is
talking about,
sending
lady,
people to
with
the
your
US, Al-Qaeda
agenda?
style, to carry out an attack. That's one model. The early indicators are that's not it. What ISIS has been more involved is trying to reach out, find people that are like-minded in the U.S., and embolden them and encourage them to carry out attacks here. Early indicators are that it's the latter, not the former.
All right.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I'm just going to say, we're having this debate about terrorism or domestic. Doesn't make any difference. There are a lot of dead people at the point of a gun. Guns are
What
really
is that
easy to
sack
get their
underneath
hands
your
on.
chin?
And that's the debate that ought to be going on. As I said a moment
What
ago,
it is
in America
some
now,
of
it's
your
taken for granted. You got a problem? Go get a gun. Go
circulatory
take care of it with a gun.
system
I grew
has
up with
been
guns
pulled
in
up
the
in your
West. We didn't
chin
have this kind of thing
and
going
tied
on
off.
at that time. Everybody had sporting rifles, and they were taught by their parents.
That's
or
what
others.
that sack
So we
under
didn't
your
have mass
chin
shootings
is.
across America like we have now. They're routine.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are going to say, does the coverage of these beget the coverage? There's all sorts of angles this debate we all know is going to take. I'm going to pause the conversation here. We'll come back to this later in the show. But we're also going to focus a little bit on the presidential race, with Republicans increasingly nervous about Donald Trump, that he may be blowing what is a winnable election. I'll talk to Republican Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, who's been sharply critical of Trump. And then there's Bernie Sanders. He'll be joining me, and I'll ask him whether he's ready to endorse Hillary Clinton and whether he's still an active candidate for president.
Violent. He's a violent communist.
We were born 100 years ago into a new American century. Born with a hunger to fly and a passion to build something better. And what an amazing time it's been. Decade after decade of innovation, inspiration, and wonder. So we say thank you, America, for a century of trust, for the privilege of flying higher and higher together.
Your body was made for better things than rheumatoid arthritis. Before you and your rheumatologist move to another treatment, ask if Xeljanz is right for you. Xeljanz is a small pill for adults with moderate to severe RA, for whom methotrexate did not work well. Xeljanz can reduce joint pain and swelling in as little as 2 weeks and help stop further joint damage. Xeljanz can lower your ability to fight infections, including tuberculosis. Serious, sometimes fatal infections, lymphoma, and other cancers have happened. Don't start Xeljanz if you have an infection. Tears in the stomach or intestines, low blood cell counts, and higher liver tests and cholesterol levels have happened. Your doctor should perform blood tests before you start and while taking Xeljanz, and monitor certain liver tests. Tell your doctor if you are in a region where fungal infections are common, and if you have had TB, hepatitis B or C, or are prone to infections. Xeljanz can reduce the symptoms of RA, even without methotrexate, and is now available in a once-daily pill. Ask about Xeljanz XR.
Welcome back. It was quite a political week as well. To paraphrase a joke from the movie Airplane, Donald Trump picked a bad week to have a bad week. Just over a month ago, Trump seemed to be having his moment. Ted Cruz and John Kasich had dropped out. Hillary Clinton was facing weeks, if not months, of fighting off Bernie Sanders. And even skeptical Republicans began thinking...
For those of you joining us right now, this is an NBC News special report, a news conference just getting underway with the latest on that mass casualties situation, the shooting.
They trumped Meet the Press with a special report.
Well, I think it's more likely than not that it was an ideologically motivated attack. Right now, we don't have any direct information that he was associated with any particular group, but it does seem
Where'd he come from?
It's no coincidence that the attack took place where it did and when it did.
Do you think the intent of it was a target for a specific group?
I think it's very likely the case. We'll know more if there's any indication of that through his personal papers, through his involvement in social media, and so on. We'll learn more about that over time, but certainly it would not surprise me.
Why do you feel it would be that club? Why do you feel that club may have been a regular target?
Oh, because it's a gay club, and it might be that we've seen a commission of an awful hate crime last night. Well, our sadness and the
Rednecks in Florida are going to get mad.
That it could have happened to anybody. It's in the nature of terrorism that all of us feel, there but for the grace of God go I. And that is the very function of it. 20 people are dead, over 40 people are injured, but thousands upon thousands of people feel some degree of fear. All of these people, every single one of them that was died or was injured, was innocent. And it could have happened to any one of us, anywhere, anytime. That's the nature of terrorism. Yes, he's in his late 20s. He lives in Fort St. Lucie. He himself is a U.S. citizen. That's not true of some of his family members. Omar Mateen. Police are going to release that information when they're ready to do that.
See? There's a very good chance that his mother did tell him to do it.
One of the things at Sheriff Deming's request is to try to make sure that the hospital is free to let those who are in the hospital trying to help their injured relatives provide that assistance without violating privacy laws, what are called the HIPAA laws. So we're doing our part in my office to make sure that there are no bureaucratic impediments to letting them comfort the injured. I don't know. Every victim has been removed. Well, let me put it this way. The nationality of family members is indicative. But again, the police are holding back that information until it's time for that to come out, until they've done a full background check on him, gone into his home, found whatever evidence there may be in his home, computers and writings and so on, as well as checking social media.
Do you believe he might have had a bomb?
There's no evidence of that at this point. The police never actually said it was a bomb. They said it was a suspicious device. All the killing that was done was with an assault rifle, with a single weapon, an assault rifle. It was done very quickly also. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Ben. It'll take many hours. There's an enormous amount of havoc in that building right now. There's blood everywhere. I spoke to somebody who was on the site, and there is an enormous amount of evidence to be collected systematically over the course of many hours on the site.
We're good. Larger press conference.
District of Florida, covering parts of Orlando, talking about the shooting. Many of the information we knew, Omar Mateen is the man described there by Congressman Grayson. In his late 20s, we believe he's 29 years old, living in an address anyway in the Port St. Lucie area. Let's bring in NBC's Gabe Gutierrez as we watch a bomb disposal unit there move outside the nightclub there in Orlando. Gabe, good morning again.
Willie, good morning. Yes, it is still a very active scene here in Orlando. Behind me, the authorities have kept the media and bystanders several blocks away from the nightclub. As you mentioned, at least about 20 people are dead. At least 42 were wounded and taken to local hospitals. Now, this investigation is just ongoing, and now with the identification of the suspect, now there are lots of questions about the motive. NBC News did speak with the father of that suspect. They were able to reach him. We were able to reach him by phone, and the father said that it's possible that his son actually noticed a while back in Miami two men kissing, and that may have caused this, according to his father. Again, authorities are still looking into that to see.
Gabe, I'm going to have to stop you right here. We have
a possible motive.
Gabe, forgive me, I'm going to interrupt you as we go to the police briefing.
Better access to the building. We have cleared the building, and it is with great sadness that I share we have not 20 but 50 casualties.
Whoa!
In addition to the shooter, there are another 53 that are hospitalized. Because of the scale of the crime, I've asked the governor to declare a state of emergency. We're also issuing a state of emergency for the city of Orlando so that we can bring additional resources to bear to deal with the aftermath. Our focus is going to be on identifying the victims and notifying the families. We're setting up a hotline for concerned family members. That is 407-246-4357. The identification process may take some time, so we ask for your patience because we want to be accurate. Concerned family members can call the hotline, however, and let them know that you have someone that you are concerned about. I continue to be so proud of our community, the support that is shown, the response that has been made. I'm also thankful to entities from all around the country and all over the state of Florida. The governor has made all the resources of the state of Florida available. Orange County has made all of their resources available. We have assistance from the White House. So every possible asset we have brought to bear. Mayor Jacobs.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer. Of course, let me start with expressing my sympathy for the families, for the loved ones of those who we have lost in the last 24 hours. We know that this affects a large segment of our community. We know that we have a very close-knit LGBT community who has been dramatically impacted by this. So to everyone who is impacted, I want you to know that our thoughts and prayers are with you, and that we are a united community, and that what we saw last night does not reflect what we feel in our hearts and our souls here in Orange County. And I am calling on every citizen here in Orange County to never forget that we stand together in times of adversity, but we don't just stand together as the city of Orlando and Orange County. We stand together as a country. We have heard from Texas, we have heard from states all across the country wanting to know what they can do to help. So when evil like this comes to our community, we respond in force.
Lady, you speak of evil.
We will do that again. And
you
thank
remember
you all
you speak
for
of
everything
evil.
that you do to make this such a wonderful place to be. We know it's going to take time to be able to answer the questions of the loved one, and there's nothing more difficult than waiting to find out the status of the people that you love. Please be patient. We're doing our best. Thank you.
As Mayor Dyer said, at this point, the nightclub Pulse has been cleared and deemed safe of any devices. We're in the process of clearing the suspect's vehicle, which is a van right outside. And just we ask that people be patient. Unfortunately, there are many victims inside the club, but like was said, you know, our priority will be on the identification of the victims and notification of the next of kin. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the outpouring of law enforcement support from as far away as Boston and Chicago that let us use their resources if needed. And of course, great community support.
The cop's going to be kicking his butt that he didn't kill him.
Community as well. I also want to commend
the heroic
The cop
and
is
courageous
going to
actions of the initial responding
be
officers
examining
who changed
himself
gunfire
for the
with
rest of his
suspect,
life
and also the heroic and
because
courageous
he did
actions
not
of our SWAT team
kill that
who
man.
rescued at least 30 victims, possible victims, and brought them to safety. So again, at this point, just patience, because unfortunately this tragedy and the amount of bodies that are in there, amount of victims, is going to take some time. Thank you. We'll answer questions at the end.
I'm Sheriff Jerry Demings, and I join our entire community in offering our sympathy to these families who have lost loved ones. This has certainly been a tragic day for all of us, and in that this is a day of worship in most places in America, we do call upon the members of the clergy to pray for those families and for this community and this nation for healing.
That's going to be difficult, sir, because they were engaged in heathen activity.
Have been working
Right.
diligently to
We will be upset because we did not have the opportunity
you all have
to
seen,
save their soul.
most recently where there were members of our hazardous device team, our bomb units, have been working from the Orange County Sheriff's Office with units from
The opportunity to save their souls
to make
was
certain
taken
that
from
we did not have any secondary type devices or what have you that were in the crisis site itself. That process has taken an extended period of time to ensure the safety of everyone, and so that's why we have not been able to remove all of the victims, if you will, from the crisis site at this point. That process is continuing. We likely have another hour or two of operational necessity to ensure the safety before we can begin that process. But we do appreciate the collaborative effort amongst all of the different local governments as well as our state and our federal government. We've all come together in unity to address this issue, and on behalf of our entire community, we thank you, the media, for covering these events and this tragedy. Thank you very much.
Yeah, can you please confirm 50?
We'll take questions after we're finished with the prepared statement.
Hello, the FBI has confirmed the subject involved in this shooting incident. At this time, we are making the notifications to the next of kin, so we will have that name to be officially released to you at the next press conference. What I want to put out right now is that, as we all know, in many situations, people come and go to nightclubs such as these. So what I'm asking is if anyone out there attended this nightclub and then left before the shooting happened, I would urge you to still call in and come and talk to our investigators, because you don't know exactly what you may or may not have seen. So we would appreciate everyone coming forward, no matter how small the evidence in your mind may be. The other thing is we are actually setting up a family assistance center at the Hampton Inn located at 43 Columbia Street. We currently have it now at ORMC, but we're going to go ahead and move it down to the hotel in order to accommodate more family members and attempt to reunite people with either their loved ones or gather information on people who have not yet been located.
Can you just confirm that number? 50? Did you say 50?
50.
In addition to 53 in the hospital.
You mentioned earlier,
I thought we had one more. No, we have a couple more people who are going to speak, and then we'll answer some questions.
Good morning. As many of you are aware, a little after 2 o'clock this morning, we were notified of many victims, gunshot victims. As Central Florida's only level 1 trauma center, we immediately activated our mass casualty incident plan. We immediately brought in 6 trauma surgeons to respond, including 1 pediatric trauma surgeon. We have spent the morning operating on a number of victims. We continue to operate on them. We have found many of them are critically ill as a result of their injuries. And we are in the process of trying to reunite families as we identify the names of these victims. As has been mentioned, this will take some time, and we ask for your patience. But we will reunite the families and the victims just as quickly as we can. Thank you.
You need blood donors.
Blood is a wonderful gift. That can all be arranged
through the local blood banks. Please don't come to the local hospitals, but you can work through the local blood banks to be able to donate.
Many stations joining us right now, expecting to see Meet the Press, but this is an NBC News special report with an update on the horrific mass shooting at a nightclub in Orlando. Police still briefing us there. Let's listen in.
My name is Muhammad Musri. I'm the President and Senior Imam of the Islamic Society of Central Florida and National President of American Islam. I'm here today to stand as a faith leader with our law enforcement community and our city leadership in this hour of horror that was brought upon our city.
Hour of horror.
I've worked with these leaders for over 20 years.
Yeah.
I know their
Denounce the action.
And their determination to make sure this city is safe. And I call on everybody in the community, anybody who has any information, to please call the FBI, share what you know. It may help answer many unanswered questions yet. I also call on my fellow faith leaders, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever faith you follow. Please pray for the victims and their families in this hour, on this Sunday morning.
Denounce the action.
It's supposed to be a beautiful morning, but it is already a very heartbreaking morning.
A very heartbreaking morning.
I want to praise the courageous effort.
But you didn't denounce the action of the killer.
OPD,
the action of the killer was awful.
One of the officers, as we heard, was
Say it.
injured. And that's a risk they take every day to protect us. No one could have predicted this. No one could have
predicted it.
Prepared for it. This could have happened anywhere. It's like a lightning. So they have done a marvelous job to save.
Denounce the action of the killer.
The shooter began shooting, and we are glad that this.
What he did was awful.
Control. There are no other shooters. That this person is not known to be connected with a network or other people.
Say what he did was awful.
The city residents and the visitors should feel safe. The city is as safe as the best city in the world. I want to also caution many in the media.
He ain't gonna say it.
Judgment and from, you know, sensationalizing the story.
You're not gonna say it.
Because we do not.
You're not gonna say what he did was awful.
Shifted from the focus what it is. It's a horrible tragedy.
A horrible tragedy.
Mourning. We are sad.
No, what he did was awful.
And it's not really time for any sensational news. Just.
And now you're playing it off.
Judgment. So
you're gonna play it off.
Wait till information, facts come out from the investigators, and we will all see what happened, understand it,
Oh.
stay together.
We.
Together to keep
I'm not part of that we, sir.
I thank Mayor Dyer.
What the shooter did was awful.
City leaders.
You never said it. You never denounced the action of that person.
For their leadership. Ron from the FBI.
He's not going to do it.
I think many times in the past this has been discussed as the worst nightmare, and we are sorry to know that it happened to us. We don't wish this on anybody else, and we hope this would be the last of the mass shootings that our country has been going through. I think
now you're
as a nation, we need to look at this issue of mass shootings.
Oh, now you're going to play it off on gun control.
Too many today.
But you never said what that guy did is awful.
The mass shootings that are happening all the time. Thank you.
He never said it. Pshaw. He never said it.
A radical Islamic terror connection. How is it that you guys
being the actual individual or not. And so, as I mentioned earlier, at this time I can't say exactly who the suspect or the deceased shooter is. Once we're able to do that, once the notification is made, then more details will be able to be shared, most likely from our counterterrorism division up at FBI headquarters.
Can you tell us what type of arsenal was found, how many rounds you think were fired off?
Right now, the weapons recovered from the suspect who is dead was a handgun and a AR-15 type assault rifle. An unknown number of rounds, but there were additional rounds.
He never denounced the action of that person.
We have no indication of that as of yet.
What this guy did was awful. He never said it.
Between the arrival of the shots were fired and finally going into rescue hospital.
There was some communication, but we're not going to release that right now.
Why did the SWAT team wait 3 hours?
Well, remember, this is a situation involving hostages, a situation involving things that happen very fast, and I think it was important for them to know exactly what they had. Once the initial shots were stopped, they were dealing with a hostage situation. So in that time, we need to set up, reevaluate, reassess what's happening, and make sure that all the pieces are in place. We have enough staffing to take care of any situation. We have armored vehicles that come to the scene, and those were crucial in the rescue of those hostages. So anytime we have a hostage situation, we're definitely going to use extreme measures to make sure that we have enough personnel on the scene.
You between the hostages executed before you went in between the time that the
Yeah, I can't speak to that right now. That'll all be part of the investigation.
Early this morning, there was thought that it may be 20 victims inside. That number has risen to 50. Is this now one of the 5, if not the top, mass shootings in the country?
Absolutely, yes it is. Yeah, so this morning, just based on what the initial officers saw, without jeopardizing any more safety, they thought there were about at least 20, but now it's up to 50, so definitely one of the worst tragedies. Yes. There's no indication of that right now, but that'll all be part of the investigation.
Do we know if all of the 50 were killed or shot during the initial shooting at 2, or were there any shootings after, were any shots fired after that initial shooting at 202?
There was an initial shooting at 202, numerous shots fired, and then there were gunshots exchanged between the SWAT team and the suspect at 0500 hours.
So of the 50 fatalities that we have, do we know if they were all killed during that initial shooting at 202, or were any of them killed after that?
That's unknown. That's unknown at this time.
So is this classified right now as a hate crime or as a terrorist attack?
At this point in time, we're just conducting a general investigation period. We'll determine officially whether it's a hate crime or a terrorism incident or even a violent crime once we have all the facts in place. We're at the very early stages, and as much as I would like to give you everything we have, we can't give you things that aren't 100% accurate because then it's not fair to you. So.
Like you're saying last now, you guys came back with an imam, and so I'm curious.
I'm sorry? A bomb?
An imam.
Okay.
What has changed in the last 3 hours that you're giving us less information, but now you're calling for calm?
Well, again, so since the subject has not been positively identified to the next of kin, there's not a whole lot more we can share with you at this time. Also bear in mind that we do not want to jeopardize the investigation. While we feel confident right now there are no other threats to the immediate area or the United States of America, we need to be certain of that before we put any further information out.
Were anyone injured by officer's fire, and were any officers injured?
Unknown at this time, yeah. There was one officer injured. He was hit in the Kevlar helmet with a round from the suspect. Kevlar helmet did stop that round, but the officer does have some injuries to his face from that gunshot.
How would you characterize the shooting about this? Did it come in shooting, or were people snowball these weapons in and then?
Yeah, we're still early in the investigation. Unknown how he got inside the club, but it appears like he was in there and then the shots were fired from the preliminary information.
How bad is this compared to other shootings across the country?
It's absolutely terrible.
victims inside than originally thought. So once it was safe for us to go in and we determined there were no devices, that's when we were able to discover how many victims were actually in there. Yeah, but that's all going to come out in the investigation. Right now we're going to focus on obviously the identification of all the victims and the notification of next of kin. At least a few hours.
Congressman Peter King just said that the shooter is from Afghanistan and is trained in the use of weapons. He knows what he's doing. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah.
U.S. citizen, here we are. The city beautiful was hit with one of the worst mass shootings in the U.S. Your son.
Absolutely, definitely a tragedy, not only for the city, but for our entire nation. You know, we believe this is a tragedy that could happen anywhere in the United States of America. And what we need to do is continue to be vigilant and call, if you see something, say something, and call anyone, call 911, call the FBI. If you see something that's out of place or you see someone that's acting strange behavior. No, we can't confirm that. Absolutely, just to look into the eyes of our officers told the whole story. Obviously, you know, some of those officers had 20 plus years on. One of the lieutenants, who was one of the first on the scene, is a 23-year member of the police department and almost 20 years on the SWAT team. And you could tell that they were all shaken by this incident, by what they saw inside the pub. They did an unbelievable job, courageous efforts in rescuing many hostages, at least 30 from inside the pub. But after it was all said and done, you could tell really
He never renounced the actions of the shooter.
So we're going to brief.
You're watching NBC News coverage of the worst mass shooting in U.S. history with a death toll that now stands at 50. Let's go back to the press conference now.
Absolutely as much information as we can disclose. There are guidelines for OPD and for the FBI and FDLE, but we're going to give you everything we can possibly give to you. Right now, we want to focus on identifying the victims and notifying their families. So I would hope you would lead with the information about how families can call in and check on their loved ones or give information about they might think that their loved one was among those who are missing. And we can you give that information? You got it.
407-246-4357, 407-246-4357. People can call if loved ones want to call and try and get some information or help us with information. They can also call the FBI for any tips, and that's 1-800-CALL-FBI, and they'll just hit option number 2 when prompted. 1-800-CALL-FBI, option number 2 when prompted. And one more time, our hotline for family members is 407-246-4357.
We'll target the next media briefing at 1. We're targeting the next media briefing at 1:30 today. We do understand that Governor Scott is en route, so he may want to do something before that, and we'll keep you guys updated on that. But the next law enforcement briefing will be at 1:30.
We can now classify this as the worst mass shooting in the history of the United States of America, with 50 now dead, according to police. 53 more injured. Doctors there saying many of those critically, so that number could rise. The FBI
very sad.
An AR-15 assault rifle was used along with a handgun found on the man, the shooter, named Omar Mateen, a United States citizen born in 1986 in New York with an address in Port St. Lucie. We have a statement that we've reached out and talked to the man's father, telling us he's shocked, he's stunned by this, but he did go on to say that he saw his son. Here's what it says. We're saying we're apologizing for the whole incident. We weren't aware of any action he's taking. We're in shock like the whole country.
Yeah, but he
This
didn't
had
denounce
nothing to
it.
do with
They're not
related
denouncing
to
his
shooter's
action.
father when reached by NBC
None
News.
of them
But
were
he did go on to
denouncing
say,
the
keep
action.
in mind,
His father didn't denounce
a
it.
very popular gay nightclub in Orlando. The man's man's father went on to say that Omar Mateen saw two men kissing a couple of months ago in Miami and became enraged by that. So his own father suspects that may have something to do with it. Let's bring in NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams.
He obviously was not American.
After that press conference.
Mateen is 29 years old. There's a little confusion here because his father's last name is Siddiqui, and we weren't quite sure about the name, but now we're sure it is Omar
There's
Mir
awful heathen
Mateen.
things that happen.
The father told us that he uses the last name Mateen.
The reason why we have a
Father's,
constitution is
last
so
name
that
Siddiqui.
we do
Born in
not
New
have
York,
to
but was
kill
living near his
the
parents
unbeliever.
in Florida.
We
think
can
that
follow the
FBI
teachings
had
of
looked at
Jesus
him, or
Christ
had
and
been
love
some
the
local
unbeliever.
investigation of him a couple of years ago because of some people he was associating with, but we're told that nothing came of that, and that he was not on any kind of current surveillance. Now, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is tracing to see how he got the weapons that he used, the assault-style rifle, as the police described it, an AR-15 style rifle, which can carry a high-capacity magazine, and also a handgun. It's going to take a long time for the forensic work to be done to see whether the people who were shot inside were shot with the handgun or with the AR-15 type weapon. He did have a license to carry guns. He had a security guard's license and either was or had been at one time working as a security guard. So he had some, we believe, some familiarity with firearms. We don't know of any criminal past, so he would have been legally entitled to buy those weapons. There was no restriction on that in Florida on acquiring assault weapons. Not sure about the Florida gun law on high-capacity magazines, but we've so often seen in these mass shootings that the people who carry them out use high-capacity magazines because of the simple fact that they can repeatedly fire without having to reload or change magazines. The magazine is the term for the device that attaches to the weapon that holds the rounds. But it's going to be a while before we know what was used to carry out the attack. So there's a very aggressive investigation to go on now to see whether, as you heard the police say, was this an act of radical terrorism, Islamic-inspired radicalism, or was it a hate crime, or were there aspects of both? And it's going to be a while before we know the answer to that, but that's a very urgent question. You heard the authorities say that the next of kin are still being notified, but I think they've pretty well finished with that now. Maybe the word hasn't reached the authorities in Florida that that work is pretty well done now. So they will be releasing the name here shortly, and we're told by a number of officials and family members that it is Omar Mir Mateen, 29 years old, originally born in New York. Not sure when he and the family moved to Florida, but that's something that the investigators will now be trying to do, is retrace his steps, build a timeline, a chronology of all the events leading up to this, going back, certainly in granular detail, hours and days leading up to this. Who was this person talking to? When did this plan come into focus? Why and when did he choose this particular nightclub in Orlando, which is not right outside his home? Maybe he was living in Port St. Lucie. That's 100 or so miles away. Why then? Why that place? Those are always the questions that they'll try to answer.
Again, the initial assessment from law enforcement from their first press briefing was that approximately 20 people had been killed, but in the intervening hours they went into that club and found 50 killed in this nightclub shooting, the Pulse nightclub, a very popular place in South Orlando. Police initially said there were probably 300 or more people in the club when the shooting began sometime around 2 o'clock this morning. If you're just joining us, here's basically how it happened. 2 o'clock in the morning, Orlando time. The man we now know to be Omar Mateen, armed with an assault-style rifle, an AR-15, and a handgun, starts shooting at the Pulse nightclub. There was a uniformed Orlando police officer working security who immediately engaged the shooter, but it developed into a hostage situation that lasted more than 3 hours. Sometime around 5 o'clock Eastern time, 5 in the morning that is, a SWAT team was sent in. The decision was made that they had to go in and take out Omar Mateen. They did just that. 9 Orlando police officers were involved. One of them injured when he was shot in the head, saved, police say, by the Kevlar helmet he was wearing. But again, the number now, 50 dead in Orlando in this now historically awful nightclub shooting. Pete, when we spoke a little bit earlier, you said no criminal record as far as we know for Omar Mateen, but he had been touched on in some way, perhaps by authorities, perhaps in the span of another investigation. Any more information on that, and whether or not he was perhaps known to authorities?
No more information on that. What we've been told here from a couple of federal officials is that his name was in kind of a watch list, or at least someone who had come across the FBI's range of interest 3 or 4 years ago, but more because we believe at this point that he was in touch with some other people that were investigated. In other words, he was sort of on the periphery of people they were looking at. But this happens all the time, where the FBI becomes interested in someone. This is such a difficult thing for law enforcement. If somebody says something that they're interested in carrying out an attack, or they're in touch with known radicals, then you look at those other people, but you can't just look at them forever. And if they don't seem to be in any kind of an active role or supporting anyone, then you move on. Where our initial information is that he was sort of on the edge. He was someone that other people who were at the focus of interest were looking at.
All right, Pete Williams, we'll be back with you shortly. We want to turn now, though, to Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, kind enough to take some time with us. Mr. Mayor, I begin with extended national condolences to you and your city for the unthinkable loss that you have suffered this morning, sir.
Thank you. Certainly unimaginable and the worst tragedy that has ever occurred in our city.
Tell me about the phone call you received this morning. What time was it, and what did you hear?
I got a phone call about 3 o'clock letting me know that we had a hostage situation at the nightclub. The majority of the shooting had already occurred at that time. We had set up a command center. We knew that there were hostages inside. We were receiving text messages. The shooter was in one area of the club with an unknown number of hostages. We think 6 or 7, but there were another 15 to 20 hostages in another area. About 5 o'clock, OPD made the decision that they would breach the wall in the area where the 15 to 20 hostages were. We successfully evacuated all of those hostages. But during that course of time, the shooter emerged. That's when one of our officers got wounded, and when the shooter was taken down.
Can you tell us the status of that injured officer? We understand he was shot in the head, but was wearing his Kevlar helmet.
He received scratches. He's going to be fine, but the helmet certainly saved his life.
The response from your uniformed officer working security there at 2 o'clock this morning at the nightclub, he may have saved a lot of lives by engaging this man as he walked in. What can you say about the work that your police force did today?
All of our police officers, as well as sheriff's deputies who also responded, are true heroes today. As bad as the total is, it could have been worse. There were at least 300 people that were in the nightclub when the shooter began his rampage. One of our officers did engage him in a shootout, which I'm led to understand then led to the hostage situation. So he's certainly a hero, as are all of the officers who breached the building and took and rescued the hostages, quite honestly, and then took the shooter down.
Mayor Buddy Dyer, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And again, our condolences to you and the city of Orlando on a terrible day.
Thank you very much.
Let's turn now to NBC's Tom Brokaw. He's in Washington. Tom, you've been watching this all morning. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that this is a tragedy of epic proportions. It's just god-awful, the worst mass shooting in our country's history. And, of course, it comes in the middle of a very heated political debate. Twitter is already alight with folks weighing in from both sides, people pointing to the Islamic name, other people pointing to the use of an AR-15. I really think it's in the country's best interest, and especially the candidate's best interest, to take a beat here and engage in a thoughtful dialogue, a prayerful dialogue, if you will, about what we've come to in this country, where everything seems to get settled by a gun for whatever reasons. We don't know whether this was ISIS motivated or it was just one deranged individual. We don't know yet, and
may have been before we can engage in a debate that may lead us to some kind of a resolution of too many mass murders in this country, not just because of Islamic-inspired mass murders, but we have them all across America now. More than 3 people being killed at a time is designated a mass murder, and between Santa Barbara and now, there have been clusters of them across America. That eventually has to be part of who we are and how we talk about it as a civilized people. That would be my hope, at least, Willie.
And Tom, the other side of this is that, you know, we've come to know terrorism over the last 15 years as a vast international network, but now what we've seen time and again are isolated people who can work alone and wreak this kind of havoc with a gun.
Well, that's the point, and we have not had, I believe, a really enlightened discussion about how we deal with that kind of rage, whether it's motivated by a distorted version of what Islam is all about, as some kind of an outraged citizen who wants to take revenge on whoever is before him. But especially we have to talk about what's going on in the Middle East with ISIL still having such a grip on that part of the world, and bombing them back to the Stone Age probably is not going to work because they reconstitute themselves very quickly. And do we know that they have a network in this country? Most national security experts say, yeah, there are hidden cells. We don't know whether this has anything to do with all of that. And it's
the man never
denounced
the
action.
action.
Take a deep breath, get the facts in hand, and then I hope we can reach across partisan lines and have the kind of discussion that
he never renounced his
some
action.
sort of resolution of it all, Willie.
In front of the whole world.
Omar
He never
Mateen
renounced
is
his
the shooter's
action.
name, 29 years
Fine
old,
as
was
my
reported
boy.
to us by Pete Williams, an address living in Port St. Lucie, Florida, a U.S. citizen, born in the state of New York, and law enforcement officials telling NBC News that they believe he was radicalized in some way by propaganda. How he was radicalized or by whom or what, they're not saying right now. Tom, stay with me if you would. I want to bring in NBC's Gabe Gutierrez because he's down in Orlando on the scene with more. Gabe, good morning again.
Willie, good morning. Well, here on the scene, we're getting a sense of just the massive scale of the scene that investigators now have to process. As you've been mentioning, a few hours ago at that news conference, it was about 20 people dead. Now that investigators have been able to get into the nightclub, that death toll climbing to at least 50 dead, 53 injured. Just an incredible scene here in Orlando. And witnesses throughout the night have been describing this chaotic scene. And one of them that we spoke with, Christopher Hansen, says that the shots rang out at first. Many of the people in the club thought that it was part of the music. There was mass confusion going on. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about the moment that police responded.
Then you hear just bang, 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 and it's continuous. So at first we thought it sounded like the music, and then after that, I looked over and I saw bodies falling, people screaming.
Just an incredible scene here in Orlando. He also went on to say that as he was leaving the nightclub, as he managed to crawl out, he saw one man that had a gunshot wound, and he tried to help him. He's not sure how that man ended up, but he was able to take him to paramedics. Again, the investigation ongoing here over the last few hours. Police have been busing several of the witnesses to the Orlando Police Department to interview them, and from the aerial pictures we have seen that a bomb disposal robot is still on the scene. Again, that suspect recovered with an assault-style type rifle, a handgun, and also some sort of suspicious device that no doubt police are going through right now. Willie, back to you.
Ken, police say they have cleared the nightclub of any explosive devices that they may have been looking for and of the suspects, the shooter's car, which was a van parked right outside the club. Gabe, thanks so much. We'll be back to you shortly. You are watching NBC News coverage of the worst mass shooting in United States history. Police briefing us about 20 minutes ago, 50 people now dead. Another 53 brought to the hospital after a shooting inside Pulse, the popular gay nightclub in Orlando. The gunman, identified by federal law enforcement sources as Omar Mateen of Port St. Lucie, Florida, he is now dead. He was killed when SWAT
What he
teams
did was
stormed the
awful.
nightclub just after 5 o'clock Eastern time this morning. Orlando Mayor